when somebody collects unearned income, they have no incentive to continue to innovate. They have an incentive instead to keep collecting. When they take too much of the revenue, the people who make content will find somewhere else to go. Here I'm saying to companies like Google and Amazon, adopt this ecosystem thinking. It will be good for you. Gresham's law says bad money drives out good. And that is if there are two currencies that are convertible, and both in circulation, in a country, say, they'll say they take, the local currency and they take US dollars, people will hoard the dollars and give out the local currency. And so in a similar way, effectively the bad websites and the bad sources of content, because they're cheaper, are the ones that their algorithmic provider ends up featuring. So I think it's really bad for users in the long run. But mostly I think it's bad because innovation just goes somewhere else. And a lot of my thinking on this was shaped by, my earlier in my career when Microsoft was the big dog of the computer industry. I mean, they've rediscovered how to be a big dog again, but they controlled the personal computer industry very deeply. They were a monopoly, and they basically drove entrepreneurs, they drove software developers out of the market because they literally said, "Oh, that's a good category. We have to own it." And so developers went somewhere else. They went over to the internet, and I think that lesson should not be lost on Google, that when they take too much of the revenue, the people who make content will find somewhere else to go to monetize it, because Google doesn't let them do that anymore on the web. And so the web will become more and more stale, the web will become less and less interesting, and Google will become less and less relevant. And then there'll be a moment when, just as Microsoft had to wake up and realize they weren't king of the hill anymore, where Google goes, "Oh my God, what happened?" And they could be seeing that now and saying, wait, how do we keep our marketplace, our ecosystem vibrant? And of course, this is a metaphor for our entire society. We built this fragile system in which a few companies are being optimized for, and the system as a whole is weak.
And, maybe eventually over time, that dilution actually leads to people departing for another service or another competitive, alternative. However, you make a really great point here that there is a downside for the consumer, but there is a much greater downside for those suppliers, for those producers.
That's right.
Whether you are a seller on Amazon, a developer on Microsoft, a website or a content source on Google search. And although the consumer can kind of wait it out and is minimally damaged, we keep on seeing the FTC and the DOJ try to kind of make like a three-sided argument here where it's, oh, well, they're taking supplier data and then ultimately that's hurting the consumer. And they're trying to map these complaints back to the consumer. Is there a way to just keep this antitrust conversation focused on the supply when it comes to an Amazon, a Google search? Is that some of what you're getting at in your thinking here?
I am not a legal scholar, and I am not I'm not really equipped to say how to implement the policy. In fact, a lot of what I have tried to do is really be a voice for the companies, just like I was, say, with my activism in the 90s and early 2000s for open source software. I was saying to companies like Microsoft, hey, adopt it. It will be good for you. And here I'm saying to companies like Google and Amazon, adopt this ecosystem thinking. It will be good for you. And so I'm less focused on antitrust and remedies and so on, and more on, hey, this is the way the world works. Learn how to manage your marketplace sustainably, because if you don't, it won't end well. And so that's been the main focus. It's really an activist focus rather than a legal focus. That being said, I do think that there are definitely people who are thinking about how this plays into legal arguments. And I'm working with Mariana Mazzucato, the economist, on just a general theory of tech. And it's less focused on antitrust than on the economic theory of what they call rents, which is basically unearned income. And I make the case that there's a new, rents, basically, the term goes really back to the Middle Ages when, you owned the land, you didn't produce anything, but you got to collect the rent. So the peasant farmers, growing things. Early in economics, they basically said, look, no, actually the land and the people who work it are the source of value, and the landowners are basically extracting unearned income. You fast forward, and Mariana has a great book on this, The Value of Everything, where she talks about the moving, story in our economy about who we think creates value. And she says, look, we have to engage in a real discussion about who we believe creates value, because it shapes our value, our idea of fairness. And when somebody collects unearned income, they have no incentive to continue to innovate. They have an incentive instead to keep collecting. And we have unearned income all through our society. You think about, in real estate, for example, if you own a house, it appreciates. You don't have to fix it up. In fact, your house may be rotting away around you, and it can be going up in value. You don't have to be improving it. If stock prices are going up, you can basically be making boneheaded decisions and still make a lot of money. You can be doing, you think about both Travis Kalanick and Adam Newman at WeWork, who walked off with billions despite the fact that their companies are still not making any money. That's because basically stock market appreciation, in the absence, stock market appreciation is untethered to actual profits, is a kind of rent. The original theory of why you pay more for a stock than the present earnings is because you're going to keep earning over some period of time. But we suddenly got this theory, 10, 15 years ago, that you could bet on a company even if it had no earnings. And at that point, it's just an opportunity for people to take money out of the system and never deliver the value that's supposed to be collected later.
Hi, this is Alex from Winner Take All. Thanks for joining us. Hope you enjoyed the content. Feel free to leave a comment, ask us questions, and definitely make sure to join us on our next live stream.